incidentally, we are about to start. But just for everyone's information, please, everyone's information, we will do live streaming here today, so we are starting in 2 minutes. I'm still practicing, ladies and gentlemen. Could I have your attention? Just for everyone's information, we are doing a live streaming here. We're starting in a minute and a half. So please take your seats and behave. This is going on. The moderator has one headset of a microphone, so we have one. So if you have any questions, then please ask for a microphone. Otherwise, this will not be possible to go live.
Good morning. God morgon. Guten Morgen. Hyvää huomenta. Lapas, rypas. Здравствуйте. Oh, sorry. And some more. Dzień dobry. And still more. Bonjour. God morgon. Tere hommikust. Thank you for that. Sustainable development durable. Nachhaltige utveckling. Hållbar utveckling. What is it in Polish, sustainable development? Yes? Okay, sounds very good. Kestävä kehitys. And climate change, but we don't do the translations for that. These are the huge topics that we have for 3 hours to discuss about the global sustainable development goals and how are we going to implement these big important goals in our cities, in our communities, taking the challenge from the very global level to the very local level. And that's what implementation will take. And that's what implementation in the cities is all about. There's this bottom up, but there needs to be, there's this top down, but there needs to be a strong element of bottom up as well. And there needs to be a lot of integration and horizontal cooperation in the cities and involvement of different stakeholders and different interest groups and the civic society. And that's not going to be easy, but it's very well in line with the overall theme of the 14th UBC General Conference. Cities as leaders for local sustainable development. And the first session, the first part will be dedicated to the sustainable development goals. Then after the coffee break, we have a second part, and there we will discuss the other great global challenge. How shall we respond to climate change in our cities? What kind of mitigation actions can we take? How can we take those as efficiently as possible in order to slow down the warming up of the planet? And as importantly, how do we adapt to the changing climate? How do we manage the risks that arise in our cities? How do we make our cities resilient and safe in conditions of changing climate, of unpredictable weather events, in rising sea levels, and possibly climate migration on a large scale? All of these topics. And for the session, we have, for both of these two topics, we have a similar approach. We discuss the topic from the larger context into the local context. So we have representatives of intergovernmental organizations here. We have representatives of the organizations of regions. And we have, for the second session, a representative from a global climate reporting and disclosure organization. So we can look forward to very good debates and interesting presentations. And then we'll have a summary from the representative of the youth. His name is Toivo, which means hope in Finland. And indeed, we need to have hope and optimism for our cities and for the future. The first speaker, I have the pleasure to welcome the head of the Baltic Sea Regional Agenda 2030, Krista Campus, head of unit from the Permanent International Secretariat of the Council of the Baltic Sea States. So, Krista, please take the floor and enlighten us.
Hello, it works. So, good morning everybody. I'm very happy to be here and I'm very, very thankful for having me. So, I am actually also coordinating horizontal action climate in the frame of the EU strategy for the Baltic Sea region, but today I am focusing my presentation on all sustainable development goals and how we are working or how we're supposed to work with them in the macro-regional context, but also in the cities and local level. As Risto already said, that Council of the Baltic Sea States is the organization which supports intergovernmental cooperation between 11 countries around the Baltic Sea. Iceland and Norway and Russia are also our members. And we have 3 long-term priorities. Despite of being intergovernmental, we of course are working with all different stakeholders, from the NGOs, starting and ending up, of course, with the governments. And we have also, when it comes to coordination of sustainable development, then we in the Council of the Baltic Sea States, we have expert group on sustainable development. And it is not only the group which is focusing on national implementation of sustainable development goals, but it is also the network which involves almost all Baltic organizations. And I'm very happy to say that Union of the Baltic Cities is also the member of this group. And the main aim of the group is actually to coordinate sustainable development goals implementation in the Baltic Sea region, and also to activate that process and to engage different stakeholders in that process. We have a lot of knowledge available, we have a lot of different activities going on in the Baltic Sea region, but the problem is that all those activities are very, how I would say, fragmented. There is a need for better coordination in order really to create good synergies so that we can learn from each other and share our best good and worst practices when it comes to sustainable development. Currently, we are holding, or CBSS holds Swedish presidency, and I'm very happy to say that implementing 2030 agenda and sustainable development goals is also one of the Swedish CBSS presidency priorities. Of course, you know, and there are beautiful boxes on the wall, what all these 17 sustainable development goals are. I think you all know that those main principles when it comes to implementation, which means that there should be system approach, which means that there should be holistic implementation. You cannot pick only one, but you have to implement all of them, and you really have to think that if, for example, poverty is not the problem, then how we are dealing that, besides of providing development aid, for example. But there is also actually regional dimension when it comes to UN Agenda 2030. And of course, I forgot to mention, but I think we all know that Agenda 2030 and Sustainable Development Goals were endorsed almost like more than 1 year ago, 25th of September, and when all countries signed on it at the UN level. But this 2030 agenda document itself is actually also referring the importance of regional or sub-regional and regional dimensions. So this document says that they are acknowledging the importance of the regional and sub-regional dimensions, and regional and sub-regional frameworks can facilitate effective translation of sustainable development into policies and concrete actions in national level. So they are recognizing the importance of regional collaboration, because that is also the way how it can help and facilitate national implementation. Probably also know that when it comes to European Union level, then there is also communication, which is like white paper from last November. And in that communication, European Commission is providing the information and the vision on how they are going to implement and integrate SDGs into different EU policies. As far as I know, the Parliament has also been very active, and they have asked the European Commission to come up with more concrete action plan next year, and of course we all are looking for that. There are also countries who have been asked and are really pushing very much of renewal of EU Sustainable Development Strategy, because actually EU also has that kind of document, but it hasn't been renewed since 2006. And the Commission is not very keen on that, because, as you know, the current Commission is very much focusing on growth and jobs, and I think it will take a little bit time before they will start to understand that if you make your policies more in line with sustainable development principles, then you will have growth and jobs. Oh, that's how it works. But my voice is pretty loud, so I hope you were so quiet. So I think it worked still. Yes, and EU communication basically is highlighting how they are working, and there are two work streams. One is that they are planning to mainstream sustainable development goals into all EU policies and policy framework, and then their plan is also to develop EU long-term vision after 2020, and that is also linked, as far as I know, also with the renewal of the EU 2020 strategy for growth and jobs. And then, of course, there is also EU urban agenda, and that document also says that they are going to support holistic implementation of EU urban agenda in cooperation with local authorities and cities, and that agenda is covering also all aspects of sustainable development. Then when it comes to Baltic Sea region level, I'm very happy to say that we have been working with sustainable development issues 20 years now. This year we celebrated, no, last year we celebrated, it's 21 years now. Last year we actually celebrated 20 years of sustainable development cooperation in the Baltic Sea region, and that started when Baltic 21 initiative was established by the Prime Ministers of the BSR countries and the President of the European Commission. So that has been very high in the agenda already now 21 years, and I'm very happy that just recently the countries, let's say, reconfirmed their commitment when it comes to implementation of sustainable development goals in the Baltic Sea region. And this June, the foreign ministers of the Council of the Baltic Sea States member countries, they endorsed the document that is here on the screen, and which calls Realizing the Vision, the Baltic 2030 Action Plan. And that action plan is stressing several aspects. The first, most important aspect is that we have to collaborate better, and we really have to take SDGs as joint efforts. The action plan also identifies 6 areas, priority areas, where we have to collaborate jointly, but I have to say that those 6 areas are covering all 17, because we do not want to lose this holistic approach. We do not want to pick the only couple of priorities. And the most important is also that we would also like to promote gender equality. I know in Nordic countries countries are pretty advanced on that, but when it comes to also to my home country, which is Estonia, I think we have a lot of space for improvements. So why we need the Baltic 2030 action plan? As I said, is that we have to increase the overall level of commitment and engagement to really jointly realize sustainable development goals in the Baltic Sea region. And of course, our ambition is that we would like to become the first and the most sustainable development region in the world. And I think that when it comes to the example on how different stakeholders are working together, you cannot find any other in the world. So in that sense, we are quite unique. That action plan is also very unique because this is the only action plan in Europe which actually is covering like 11 countries, or which is macro-regional action plan. And of course, we would like to strengthen sustainable development governance in the Baltic Sea region. And what we would like to do with this action plan, or what is the aim? We would like to increase the partnerships and cross-sectoral collaboration. We would like also to promote policy integration and coherence, because that is something which is extremely complicated and challenging and hard, how to bring people out of their boxes. And we have those 6 priority areas. I'm not going into detail because I know there is a lot of presentations today and I can cover all the day, but I think you would like to hear other people as well,
it's
of course.
It's good if you say something about them.
Okay.
I think it is important.
What we basically in that action plan, what governments approved, and I also have to say that it wasn't like elaborated by the governments, that action plan, that actually it was a very inclusive process, in the sense that we also consulted with all pan-Baltic organizations who then consulted with their members. So it is not only for the governments or only for the Council of Baltic Sea States or only for our expert group on sustainable development, but this is for the whole region. And I think this is very important, and that kind of provides the framework on how we can collaborate around those 6 priority areas. As you see, there is one priority area which is separate one, and this is of course goal 13, and this is about sustainable and resilient cities and communities. No, 11. I'm working with climate, of course, number 13 is also always in my mind. Goal 11, and this is the goal for urban development. Then, of course, we have also climate action, and as you see, that involves or covers several relevant goals as well. Then equality and social well-being for all, which also covers 6 different sustainable development goals. Then we have transition to a sustainable economy and quality of education and lifelong learning. So those are those 6 priority areas which then are kind of covering all 17, as I said. And of course, one of the most important goals is goal 17, and it is about the governance, it is about the partnerships. And it is important because that the aim is to implement that action plan in partnership with all Baltic Sea region different stakeholders, national, regional, local, and pan-Baltic. That action plan also identifies 6 activation processes, because that is also important, like to really to promote and to facilitate all different stakeholders so that they are starting to work with sustainable development goals. Of course, again, I think when it comes to Nordic countries, then they are very, very much advanced. And there are several good examples, like Växjö is also one of those cities who is very, very seriously working with sustainable development goals, on Malmö. But then when it comes to, again, Baltic countries, not talking about Russia, my colleagues are in St. Petersburg at the moment to promote SDGs also in Russia. But it is very important really to make sure that all are involved and nobody is left behind. Then, of course, CPSS expert group on sustainable development has like special role when it comes to monitoring and implementation. and you also see what is the specific tasks when it comes to this group and implementation of the action plan. But why? The topic is localizing, and why local implementation matters, why it is so important. I can just refer to former EU General Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, who said that our struggle for global sustainability will be won or lost in the cities. When it comes to goal 11, then you see that actually that is, I very much like those sketch kind of presentation. It's from Africa, actually. But that describes what are the targets and sub-goals under goal 11. And as you see that even if there is specific goal dedicated for the cities, then there are also other goals where cities are playing very important role. So all SDGs are directly related to responsibilities of local and regional governments, and especially when it comes to delivering basic services for the citizens. And I think that is why cities and local governments are very important when it comes to SDGs implementation. We of course also have to remember that majority of the people in the European Union, but also in the Baltic region, are living in urban areas. More than 70% in the EU, and also 85% of GDP is generated in the cities. So in that sense, urban areas are engines of European but also Baltic regional economy, and they also act as catalysts when it comes to innovative, sustainable solutions, promoting transition to low carbon and resilient societies. But then also cities are the places where are the problems, the biggest problems when it comes to especially social aspects, unemployment, pollution, poverty, segregation, all those things. And therefore the achievement of SDGs depends on the ability of local and regional governments to promote integrated, inclusive and sustainable territorial development. And there are a lot of different toolbox actually developed to help the cities and local governments to implement sustainable development goals. There is one recent roadmap for localizing SDGs implementation and monitoring at subnational level, and that has been actually elaborated by the Global Task Force of Union of the Cities and Municipalities. And that roadmap highlights 4 important or key steps in order to get started with SDGs implementation in the cities. First and the most important is, of course, initiation, inclusive and participatory process, but then also setting local SDGs as a part of the local and city strategies and action plans, and also monitoring and implementation and evaluation is part of that. What we are doing at the moment, and these are my 2 slides. What we are doing at the moment at the Council of the Baltic Sea States level, as I said, that we are at the moment working very much when it comes to activation processes, increasing the capacity, knowledge, building awareness, and we just this October started with Baltic Leadership Program on 2030 agenda. We have 27 participants from 9 Baltic region countries. And I'm very happy that we have also 10 representatives from the cities and regions who are participating in this program. And that program really brings together national sustainable development coordinators, then regional representatives, pan-Baltic organizations, and local level implementers. We are also trying to improve the situation when it comes to collecting all this fragmented but very good information available here. So we are at the moment elaborating the portal, like information portal called Baltic SDGs, and the aim of this portal is to serve as the gates for information for all different stakeholders regarding sustainable development goals, best practices, how countries are working, reports, what has been done at the UN level, etc. So that's how we are working at the moment. So I can't say let's implement, because many of you already implement, but still, let's implement and let's continuous implementation of Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you.
Thank you for the very encouraging presentation, and congratulations for the good achievements with the preparation and also for the implementation, which I understand is in the first phase.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I have one question which may be a little bit stupid, but I will make it anyway. You mentioned that there are, or you presented the 6 focus areas, and then there is also 6 implementation mechanisms being used.
Yeah.
Is 6 now the figure for sustainability in Baltic Sea regions?
Maybe 12.
Okay.
Yeah, 6 and 6, yeah, that is what those 2 important numbers what we have at the moment for the Baltic Sea region. But we don't have to forget that those 6 means 17.
Sure, but 6 is more easy to remember.
6 is more easy to remember, and then somehow you have to, let's say, group sustainable development goals which are relevant, and that the aim also, like having those 6 priority areas, was that the focus really on this holistic and systematic implementation, and to facilitate this cross-sectorial collaboration. That is also thinking behind of having those 6 areas.
Mm-hmm. Would anybody like to make a brief question or comment to Krista?
Sure.
You are welcome if you like. And we will have more time for discussion also after the following presentations. I think we can all really share the vision, and as Union of Baltic Cities, we are truly committed to making the Baltic Sea region the first truly sustainable development in the world. And it will be our pleasure to contribute to the process together with CBSS and other partners. So thank you very much, and we can have more discussion later. Then the next speakers are representing a regional perspective from the Council of Peripheral Maritime Regions, also Bjerkvik, and from Euroregion Baltic, Sebastian Magier. Please take the floor.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sebastian Magier, Euroregion Baltic. It's a pleasure to start our presentation. We will not have a typical PowerPoint presentation. I'm just going to talk to you about the regional perspective, and with also hearing from the CPMR, Baltic Sea Commission. And we see, thanks to Krista's very good presentation, she talks a lot about the international, the intergovernmental, and the local level. And where we come in is the regional level of SDG implementation in the Baltic Sea region. And now both organizations, they are pretty much working with the regions in the Baltic Sea, the maritime regions, and there are 25 of them together now. And we've decided, also initiated this process, and then we jumped in later on to actually talk to the regions about the sustainable development goals, about the Agenda 2030 in the Baltic context, to see how the regions can actually help in implementing the goals in the Baltic setting. So for us as the Euroregion Baltic, we are pretty much involving 5 countries in the southeast of the Baltic Sea, most of them are EU countries. So here you have all the frameworks, all the instruments of the EU policies, and in the Baltic context you have EU strategy for the Baltic Sea region. But then we also have the Kaliningrad region, which is our member since the beginning, and they are outside of those instruments. Of course, there is a dialogue going on through horizontal action neighbors, for instance, in the strategy. But then the Agenda 2030, adopted by UN, is a universal instrument that also applies to those members, all those countries who are outside of the EU. So we've said that we will be very happy to actually tackle the sustainable development through this instrument, also including our member in Kaliningrad region. So that was the main argument for us. Of course, there are others, but then I would like to ask Åsa to actually present their view of the SDGs.
Thank you. So if Sebastian then comes from Euroregion Baltic, in the southern part of the Baltics, I work for a pan-European organization called the Conference of Peripheral and Maritime Regions. And we're 160 regional authorities in the European setting. And I'm based in Brussels, but I work primarily for the interests and the perspectives from the Baltic Sea. But I have colleagues that work primarily on following the global agenda, for example, and where the regional voices have, throughout the last 3 or 4 years, or actually longer, together with the cities, worked very hard on voicing up the territorial dimension of the Sustainable Development Goals. And a year ago, so CPMR then is focused very much on the territorial dimension, also in the European setting. And the majority of my colleagues in Brussels are actually lobbying for the cohesion policy. And now we speak about the ERDFs, the agriculture, the European Social Fund, and of course the Fisheries Fund. So these are means for implementation of the joint, and this is where we came in approximately a year ago, of our joint Vision EU 2020. A sustainable, competitive Europe. That is the joint vision that we have worked on until now. And now we're moving into a new programming area. We're very, very busy with understanding what are our governments saying, what is the Commission saying, where is the European Parliament, and how do we, together of course with the Committee of the Region and many other of the lobby organization, voice up. And we have been saying now for 3 or 4 years that we want a continuation. We want a vision for Europe. EU 2020 was a vision that we all have worked on. How can we implement this in the best way? We understood 2 years ago that maybe this will not come. Maybe we will not see a clear and understandable path forward for that specific vision. Instead comes the global vision of transforming our world. And as Krista Campos from the Council of the Baltic Sea States said, when the Commission issued a communication in November a year ago, we sat down, and we sat down specifically in the Baltic Sea Commission that I work for. And we said, now what will this mean? Could this be a vision that we stand behind? Not only as member states, not only as regions or cities, but could the EU actually say, we voice up and stand behind this? And what will that mean for our money? Because we're talking about implementation, and I'm talking right now in front of the Union of Baltic Cities, the cities maybe being one of the absolutely most important implementers. And for implementing, we need funds. And they come from our local taxes. They come in the countries where we have regional taxes, from regional taxes. They come from the nation states. And they, of course, come from the European Union in different settings and different means. So it matters that the European Union stands behind. With the information that Krista said that the Parliament is now pushing for an implementation strategy here. I am just asking myself, competitive and sustainable Europe. If we take that and then we look about the Sustainable Development Goals, and we acknowledge, not only as Ban Ki-moon did, but also with the very, very evidence that we sit with, as cities, as regions, that implementation is done territorially. Then one could ask, will the SDGs use the leverage of the different tools for implementing that the European Union sets. Now, we don't know. And we don't really know what we want. And as a lobby organization, that is really difficult if you don't know what you want. So we decided, and we're very happy to partner up with Euroregion Baltic. We decided a year ago to apply for funding, and we got a small amount of funding from the Swedish Institute, where we could initiate a discussion together with the regions on this. And we spent all day yesterday preparing and working on that together. And how can we get the regions together? And then standing in front of the cities, having the CPS, the Council of Baltic Sea States here, we are together with UBC involved in the expert group that Krista talked about. And we're very happy to be that. And we are together with BSSC, many different, the University Pan-Baltic organization. We're all involved in this work. We stand behind it, and we think it's important. But we need to understand what we do in a Pan-Baltic setting. Because locally and regionally, we do a lot. And we have leverage points. I have regions, you have regions, that are currently working on the regional development strategies in a regional setting. They are working on their smart specialization strategies, wondering how can we make this competitive. These are regional steering tools that matter for you. These are tools where I'm quite sure that you have been involved in the process, that you are involved in the process. They're currently ongoing in many of the countries around the world. Because the cities is, for the region, one of the most important stakeholders. And for us, taking goal 11, that is a territorial goal, pushing not only the urban agenda, but the interplay between the urban and the rural agenda. And here we need to dwell together. Now that's what we're doing on a local regional setting. And that's one of the areas where the regions have said within our networks, we want to learn from each other, we want to share experiences, we want to understand how we can have a systematic alignment of policy on a regional level. But then we have this Pan-Baltic setting, where we see, okay, what is the role then of the regions when working Pan-Baltic? And we need to dwell on, okay, how can we connect this to different ongoing projects that we have within environment, within saving our sea, with creating prosperity for the region and connecting the region. And here, we are extremely happy to keep together with the cities being part of this newly started leadership program that CBSS is organizing. Having said that, we have a small project ongoing, and we see that as a stepping stone. It's a seed money project. So we put in a seed, and it's going to grow up to something. So instead of me talking too much, you'll just give the overview of what we are going to do during the spring. This is a 6-month process, and then we'll see where it lands.
Thank you, Åsa. It was not too long, I think. Yeah, the process starts, and we would like to engage the regions in a discussion about how to place the SDGs into their regional development strategies, how to align them, link them, and how to work with them. So first, we need to, because the process is just starting, to raise interest and awareness among the regions into what the SDGs are, what the Agenda 2030 is, because from our perspective, our experience, it seems relevant to actually bring especially regional politicians to the discussion on what it is and how to tackle it. We see the need, because not all the regions are equally engaged. There are some front runners in our organization, in your organization, and in the entire Baltic Sea region, and there are those who are not yet got on board that much. So then we bring the regions together, have a discussion to actually see the whole picture of it, so the SDGs in the Baltic setting, see the picture and find those leverage points for the regions actually to have an impact on their development strategies. basically to use the SDG as one of the sustainable tools for development in the Baltic Sea region. So that's what we are trying to do in our joint collaboration. And then, of course, the role of the regions in the implementation of the Baltic 2030. Because that's one of the important parts of the multi-level governance process in the SDG development and implementation in the Baltic 2030. So there are mainly 3 points that we would like to cover with this small initiative that we have, but we hope that it will grow, so that will be the start of the better involvement of the regions in the implementation of the SDGs. Yes?
So that's the 3 purposes to why we gather. This is what we're doing. In March, there is going to be a large conference. It's the 2nd time this conference is organized. It's called the Baltic Sea Future. It has a special focus for municipalities to get together with researchers. It is going to be held in Stockholm, and it's the 8th and 9th of March. And it's called the Baltic Sea Future, and it's dealt very much on the sustainable development goals in correlation with the urban and municipality agenda. This is the 2nd time this conference is organized. We were both attending the 1st time, and we felt that, it would have been good if we'd had our people here. If the regions had been able to interact and interfere, I was almost saying, with the cities. So what we are doing is that we are putting our event back to back with the Baltic Sea Future. And hence we're hoping that at least 30 or 40 people from the regional level will also attend and interact with you and your fellow cities and researchers at the Baltic Sea Future. So the 7th, we have a first session where we gather regional politicians and people responsible for writing the regional development strategies, or working on that issue. And we will share experiences, not only between ourselves. This is a multi-level governance issue. We want to have a city perspective there. We, of course, want to have the national coordinators coming in and discussing with us. And then we are going to start a workshop and see how can we interact with Baltic 2030. And see, can we get ideas out of what can we do, especially then to push the Baltic parts or projects or platforms or initiatives. So that's the first time. In the end of this session, we are going to say, okay, what can we do as next step? But most probably, because we want to link this to the EU strategy for the Baltic Sea region, where our member base is also very active, especially in implementation. And in June, so we're talking only 6 months here, there is a large conference in Tallinn. That is the stakeholder conference for the EU strategy for the Baltic Sea region. And the focus of that strategy will be cohesion policy, what's next? What's the future of cohesion policy or something like that? And then we are going to propose for the members that meet, or the regions that meet in March, that maybe we can do something jointly on how cohesion policy and sustainable development goals could interact, or what different leverages do they give to each other. And with that, we are extremely happy that we got to come here, and both from me and Sebastian I know, but also from how we have worked with the Union of Baltic Cities, and especially following the work of your Smart Cities, Sustainable Cities Commission. I just had 2 seconds. I'm also the supporting secretary of the informal Baltic Sea group in the Committee of the Regions. And we had a mayor, I think, or a vice mayor, from an Estonian city coming in and sharing the work that you do within the committee. And it is impressive on how much action you do. I hope we can, from the regional level, learn from you. So thank you for having us.
Thank you so much for enlightening us on the regional perspective. We have a common goal. On the state level, we want to implement the SDGs in Baltic Sea region. We want to do that in our cities. And now you have a good activity and approach to place the sustainable development goals into regional development strategies in the whole Baltic Sea region. And you have a series of events coming up, you have intervention activities, etc. How about cooperation with regions in other parts of the world? CPMR is connecting a large number of regions in Europe. Is there a process for learning from other parts in Europe? Just briefly, please.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
What I feel, though, we had our General Assembly in Helsinki last week. And very often, it tends to be that when we speak about the Sustainable Development Goals in a regional pan-European setting, it's about external action. It's about how do we do development aid. So we're still not there in a joint understanding that these are universal. So I would say that's number one that we have to talk about. And I would also like to say that this is, of course, at this stage, it's a voluntary process. And the voluntary regions, they are not only in the Baltics. And hence, sometimes if you want the change agents, the ones that run fast in the front, I mean, like what we see that the Helsinki Usuma is doing now on their regional development strategy, what we hear from many other regions in the Baltic Sea. We also hear from the large regions. Mecklenburg-Vorpommern is doing a very thorough job now on this, for example. But the same goes for Bayern.
Yes.
So it's a little bit, how can we get change agents of the regional authorities?
Yeah. But so we might, for instance, have a project in the future where we would connect the Baltic Sea region with some other region in Europe. Then I have one for Sebastian. You mentioned that Kaliningrad is actively involved in Euroregion Baltic, and I think that is very, very important. And they used to be very active in the UBC as well, and it's obvious that it is important that they are involved. Would you reflect a bit on their aspirations in this cooperation and project?
Yeah, certainly what we have seen recently especially is that the Kaliningrad region is doing a lot of work on the sustainable development grounds. For example, they recently launched the waste treatment plant in Kaliningrad from their city. It has been in development for many years, but it's launched. We also have seen a lot of development on the local level throughout the region when it comes to similar facilities. So there is a strategy for the Kaliningrad region, which is a lot of focus on sustainability now. So I'm sure the Kaliningrad region is very interested in sharing that with the regional partners throughout the Baltic Sea and getting this knowledge back to them as well. So that's why we think this is quite relevant for our cooperation actually to have some impact, some help, some facilitation. And we think the SDG framework is quite universal, and it will allow them to somehow better than others, maybe some other instruments are currently available to us.
Okay. Thank you for a very elaborate reflection. Would anybody like to make a question or comment from the audience? You're welcome and even encouraged to do so. No? Okay. Hopefully later. And then we will move on. Thank you so much for your presentation. And the next speaker is Mia Marklund from Karlstad. And she will now take the discussion into Sweden and into the Swedish city, or perhaps international city of Karlstad. I will leave the definition from you, so please take the floor.
Thank you. Hello everybody. So nice to see so many people visiting this seminar. My name is Mia Marklund. I work as an international coordinator at the city of Karlstad. I have 15 minutes to talk about the Agenda 2030 in Swedish perspective, and also a quick down look at what we do in Karlstad right now. Do you know where Karlstad is in Sweden? Yes. Yes. And for those who don't raise their hands, it's a city, about 91,000, almost 91,000 inhabitants. We're situated between, if you have Stockholm and you have Oslo, on top of a big lake called Vänern. A very nice city, a very nice sunny city to live in. So, let's proceed with my 15 minutes. Yeah, this is the Swedish government. This picture is taken early 2016. In Sweden, all ministers in the government are responsible for implementing Agenda 2030 within their respective areas of responsibility. In the middle you see our Prime Minister, Stefan Löfven. You have on the very right side a guy in a brown jacket. That's our Minister of Civil Affairs, Mr. Ardalan Shekarabi. He's responsible for the national implementation in Sweden. The national implementation includes municipalities. We are about 290 municipalities in Sweden. All the county councils, 21 county councils, as well as the government agencies and all the government officers. All that is in the national implementation. And how the global goals are achieved also depends on how the involvement of other actors, such as the NGOs in Sweden, all the industry, the trade unions, and the academia, they all need to be involved. So, what did the government do? Well, of course, they set up a delegation, appointed a delegation, and the Agenda 2030 delegation, in Swedish Hållbarhetsdelegationen, was appointed in 2016 with the aim of promoting and facilitating and stimulating the implementation of the agenda in Sweden. So the committee consists of 7 people. They're independent committee. The chairwoman is Parul Sharma. They come from the academia, they come from the private sector, they come from think tanks, from the public sector as well. So it's a mixture of people in this delegation. They also have a secretariat, of course, to help them. The delegation is commissioned to assess to the extent to which Sweden fulfills the goals and the targets in the agenda. How do our fulfillment proceed in Sweden? They are commissioned to submit proposals for an overarching action plan for the Swedish implementation. And they also work very hard with disseminate information and example of the best practices in the area of socially, economically, and environmental sustainable development. So, assess the Swedish fulfillment, propose an action plan, they spread the word of the agenda, and they also disseminate the best practices in Sweden. We've been talking a lot about working together, and the collective ownership is very important. The inclusive participation and the dialogue with stakeholders is central to the work of this delegation. The work of the delegation is carried out in consultations, and they've been consultating with cooperative bodies, with local authorities. They've been out in the regions, with the government agencies. They've been talking to the scientific community, with the unions, as well as the private sector and the civil society. So it's, you know, this big work, talking to, collecting, and spreading the agenda to all these parts of Sweden to get the biggest possible action going. Also, the Parliament plays an important role for the sustainable implementation efforts. We talk about children and young people. Their perspective is very important. Participation and ownership are also key aspects of the work towards sustainable development. I don't know if you heard about the hashtag First Generation. Yeah, some of you have heard about the hashtag First Generation. That was started by the Foreign Ministry in Sweden and it aims to all teachers and students to start to inform and to talk and to work about with the Sustainable Development Goals, to spread the word, because first generation, the young people, are very important for the implementation of these goals and targets. The delegation has done a half-time report where the assessment of the Swedish fulfillment, and they will keep on working until March 2019. So how does it go for Sweden then? How do we fulfill the goals of the agenda? Well, we're good, but we're not perfect. Even Sweden has come quite far in many aspects. We need to work harder to fulfill all the goals and targets in our perspective. So the focus areas for Sweden: a fair and equal society, sustainable cities. We talked about cities and the role of the cities for sustainable development. 85% of Sweden's population lives in cities. We talk about social and circular economy. We have to be better at that. We have to strengthen the knowledge and the capacity for innovation in Sweden. We have to have strong business community and also with sustainable business models. And I've noticed very local in Karlstad that a lot of our private businesses has adopted the agenda and they work with the goals to develop their business models. It's interesting. There's things happening everywhere in society. Also, of course, sustainable and healthy foods are a focus area for Sweden. So, just one more slide about Sweden and then I'll focus more on Karlstad. But on the 18th of July this year, at the United Nations High-Level Forum on Sustainable Development in New York, our Minister of Civil Affairs, Mr. Ardalan, he presented Sweden's work on the implementation of the agenda and the global goals. Now I'm hoping I may show a movie. I hope that the technique are with us. I'm going to show you a short movie that was an introduction to his speech at the UN. It's in Swedish, but it's subtitled in English, so it's just a couple of minutes. I hope you will follow.
Det kanske är svårt att tänka sig, men när jag var barn var fortfarande många väldigt fattiga.
Många fick snåla med maten och de var hungriga nästan jämt.
När jag var ung så bolmade svartsot till rödvinsfabriken.
Kan du tänka dig att min mamma inte röstade?
När jag var ung så var det självklart att kvinnor skulle stanna hemma med barnen och männen arbetade.
Sverige har faktiskt haft fred i 200 år. Och när jag föddes fanns inte ens FN.
Vi har kommit långt i Sverige, i många avseenden. Vår svenska modell, med samverkan som grund, har byggt Sverige starkt. Vi ska fortsätta samarbeta med näringslivet, civilsamhället och forskarsamhället och med andra länder. Vi ska ta ett globalt ansvar och visa lokal handlingskraft. Tiden är knapp. Men när vi kommer fram till år 2030 hoppas jag att det är det här.
Kan du tänka dig att folk drack vanligt vatten i plastflaskor och sen bara slängde bort dem?
Alltså det fanns ju folk som inte fattade att våra utsläpp skadade hela planeten.
Samtidigt som vissa inte hade nog med mat kastade man bort tonvis varje dag.
Och framgång mättes bara i pengar, inte på hur man mådde.
Tjejer tjänade mindre än killar för samma jobb. Så fel.
Och en del människor fick inte älska den de ville.
Hoppas jag att det inte ens fanns internet.
Yeah, I'm sorry about the low sound, but they were texted in English, so some people didn't. That says there was no internet. Hilarious. So let's go down on the more local level and the work in Karlstad. I think that it's the local work that makes a change. It's in the municipalities. It's in the municipalities that we actually make the transformation. But we need, of course, the regional level as well as the government level, and we need brave politicians that make brave decisions and laws to enforce this. But it's very important to use the Sustainable Development Goals on a local level to enhance the importance of local work, to think global, act local. Me as a person living in the small town of Karlstad in Sweden, I can make a difference, to use the emotional and the thinking of global local. We need a political engagement. Our city board has adapted the agenda, have a decision to adapt the agenda and to work with the goals. We have to make the SDGs a part of our local strategies because we work with sustainability, all 3 levels of sustainability, but we have to make the connection and to visualize the connection between our local targets and goals indicators and how they connect to the global and to the agenda. Yes, today we work with mobility management in Karlstad. We work with promote public transport, cycling, walking. We work with sustainable energy production. We have a fossil-free waste management, and we produce district heating and electricity. I mean, we do so much. We are a fair trade city. We focus on food, not to waste food in schools, to make the children understand the importance of not throwing away the food. We are part of the UN campaign, Making Cities Resilient. The sustainable city planning is very focused in Karlstad. We purchase goods and services for about 1.8 billion kroners a year, about 18 million euro a year. So we can, with our procurement and how we purchase goods and services, we can steer for a better future, to work with green procurement, social procurement. For examples, some very short examples. The last 2 weeks, we've been working with something called Globala Karlstad, the Global Karlstad, and celebrated 2 weeks focusing on the Agenda 2030. We've had all kinds of actions and activities going on in Karlstad. Together with the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency, called SIDA, we've focused on the global goals and how we can make a change with the local action. Some quick examples. Here in the photo you can see Mrs. Monica Bubholz, one of our city councillors. We see the city executive, Ulf Nyqvist, and then me. I'm very happy because this is the very opening ceremony of these 2 weeks. We've had photo exhibitions, one exhibition with 17 photos, each of one representing one of the global goals. It's called Transforming Our World, a very, very, very nice and very strong photo exhibition. For some example. Yes, I must come to conclusions. Yes, I just want to talk. Well, one example is we had a fair, and these very nice students, they are not just cooking and offering for the visitors some nice snacks. They are talking about, and all the food that they are serving has expired date, best before date, and they've been given the food, all the products, they've been given by a store, and they, instead of throwing it away, they made really nice small things to eat, and the message is don't throw away the food. Well, we've done so much these 2 weeks, but I see Risto is looking at me. The end of the week we had a fashion show, not just any fashion show. This was a fashion show in one of our shopping malls in the central Karlstad, with local celebrities showing fair trade clothing, eco-branded, second-hand clothing, and the theme was the consumption and the textile industry, and how does our consumption of cheap clothes in Sweden affect people working in the industry in Bangladesh or Burma or wherever. So a lot of people visit, as you see, a lot of media, a lot of public attention to this. And on the catwalk here, we have other of our city councillor, Mrs. Linda Larsson, with her daughter. Political engagement. So, that was all from me. Thank you for your attention.
We have been asked to be here in the light because they are filming. No, please don't. Hold this. Yeah. Thank you so much for the interesting presentation and a challenging one, because you were reflecting both on the national policies and on the local level work, and you did both in an excellent way. Thank you very much.
Questions? Or
exactly.
Shall we take them later after
it's
the last presentation?
How do you see, what struck me from the Swedish definition is how you're putting two things together. Because in Finland we have a strong strategy for circular economy, and circular economy is strongly on the agenda in EU as well. But you are defining it as a social and circular economy, and then you showed us some examples from the local level how the circular sharing aspect and the social aspect come together.
Absolutely, absolutely. We appointed a winner for our climate competition, and that was a lady who combined these two in a perfect matter. We have something where we have started up sort of a library with sports equipment. Imagine families who cannot afford going on the ski trip. The children want gears for skating, etc., etc. But we started up, her idea was to start up sort of a library where you can go and borrow sports equipment. And that is both circular and social. And we see lots of those examples that you can combine, the social and the environmental circle problem.
That's something we would like to learn more from you, in Turku at least, and I believe in other cities as well. Is there any quick comment or question from the audience? Yes, you're welcome, please.
Hi, I'm Hanna Meider from the Working Group for Gender Equality, and I actually gave an already answer to my questions. How do you combine the social sustainability? And I think that's something very promising, because even though statistics show vast disparities in the society, also in Sweden, I know, more in Finland and in other countries, that we have to find new means to fight against these inequalities. And I said also that we lose the game, because I present more of the sector of social welfare policy. We lose the game if we don't take people, poor people, with us with these sustainability discussions.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, it's my comment. No, it's so important, and there are so many things you can do on a local level. You don't have to think big. You can start in the small perspective, and then it will have immense, because this will spread. Her idea started it's called Fritidsbanken, for you who speak Swedish. This started in Karlstad, now it's in 45 municipalities in Sweden, and it will move on like, these ideas that are really good.
We have still one question or comment. Please come here, come up, so you will be on the film too.
Okay, it's Petter Karlsson from Mariehamn, the mayor. I was wondering, when I saw the earlier presentation with the 6 focus areas for the Baltic Action Plan 2030, now I saw the national focus areas for Sweden. What is Karlstad's focus areas, or are you taking some of those focus areas? How do we adjust the local level to all those focus areas on different regional and national levels, and how are you working with that in Karlstad?
Please briefly.
Yeah, really briefly. The work is just beginning, that's what I can say. We are still waiting for indicators and targets and how to measure this development in Sweden on the Swedish level, because we don't have that quite set yet. But of course we have our we have our plan, our strategic plan, and the goals that our politicians have set up for Karlstad. but we need to start working more and more to set this together. I don't think it really is a problem, but you have to do some sort of an analysis how these connect the local targets that we have today with the regional as well as the national and global. Many levels.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the interesting questions and comments. And now I'm welcoming our final speaker of the first part of the workshop, Irena Sakaliene, the director from the city of Klaipėda in Lithuania, to reflect on the approach and strategies and activities in Klaipėda. So please, the floor is yours.
Good morning. I'm very glad to participate here and to give some information what is going on in Klaipėda about sustainable development solutions. First of all, I would like to give you some facts about Klaipėda. Area in total about 28 square kilometers. Number of inhabitants more than 150,000. Klaipėda is actually third in terms of size in Lithuania. It is the only seaport in our country and the ice-free port. And it was founded 1252 and joined Lithuania in 1923. What plans we have about sustainable development for short terms till 2020? It's a healthy, bright and safe community. Sustainable urban development and improving the competitiveness of the city. Here you can see structure and adjacencies of Klaipėda city. And the next slide I will mention what is positive. Klaipėda actually is one of the most important development centers in Lithuanian context. And it is crossed by all the key strategic transport corridors in the Euroregion. And it is very significant and especially important transport node where the sea, road and railways intersect. Influence of Klaipėda port as the most effective loading places of containers in the Baltic Sea is increasing every year. And industrial territories and logistic terminals are developed in free economic zone, and it was established in order to attract foreign companies and their investments to Klaipėda. Very high recreational potential, part of the territory of the National Park of Curonian Spit is included in the city's territory. Here you can see Lithuanian map, and in this you can see also main transport corridors, seaport, airports, main roads. And we have connections to Russia, Poland, Belarus, and of course Scandinavia. And this one I would, this is extract from our master plan. This is under preparation. It shouldn't be here this time. Now I would like to focus on sustainable urban mobility plan, what we are doing right now in Klaipėda. Last year, the city started implementing Civitas Portis project, which designs, demonstrates, and evaluates integrated sets of innovative sustainable mobility measures that addresses problems of port cities across Europe. And in this project takes part 5 major port cities, Aberdeen and Antwerp, Trieste, Constanta, and Klaipėda. Measures of the port is enhancing some, establishing a city and port cooperation platform, developing bike storing system in the city, modernizing traffic management system ITS, giving priority to public transport in the traffic, and establishing an integrated design for traffic informational signing. For now, what we made preparatory work, study of transport expansion possibilities in Klaipėda city is already done. Special plan of expansion of bicycle infrastructure in the city is also done. Detailed plan of laying the southern connection between the Klaipėda National Seaport and Transport Corridor 9B, it's also done. And actually we made a few surveys of residents' opinion about regarding community conditions in city. And at the present, as I mentioned, the master plan of Klaipėda city is being changed, and it must be finished by the end of this year. And also the sustainable mobility plan is being prepared. And we evaluated the current situation. Also, we've made a few residents' opinion surveys. And here you can see model distribution of our journeys of the residents in the city. And you can see that majority of residents are using cars, 1/3 going on foot, another big part public transport, and of course bicycles not so much. What we are adapting to adapt sustainable mobility principles in city transport system, I mentioned that we are making new version master plan and SAMP, and city has very big ambitions to develop a large-scale transport projects. Now we are preparing feasibility study, procurement for feasibility study about transport possibilities to change in the city, because nevertheless it's not a big city. Actually in the morning, in rush hours, we have traffic jams also. And not so long time ago, the central terminal was situated almost in the city center, in the central part of the city. And now we are facing quite huge traffic jams by cargo traffic, which passes Baltic Sea Avenue. And we are quite good, I would say, developing of bicycle routes. For the time being, we have about 108 or 7 kilometers. Of course, we have a wish to install bike sharing system and drop bike system. This summer we had just for free some companies just like testing how it works, and actually residents and guests of our city like this. So the next year we are going to make procurement procedures for this to install in the city. And of course we are want to give priority to public transport and electrical vehicles. Maybe 4 years ago we made a feasibility study for sea, where we have 3 scenarios about how could city make ITS systems for the transport to make it more smart. But actually it takes very long time because of law regulation, because of city policy, and we didn't start it yet, but I hope the next year we will start it to implement. Of course, we would like to have environmentally friendly public transport, and we are developing park and ride system. Here you can see, maybe not, yeah, you can see. In yellow is what is, we were planning, municipality just planned to install bike sharing system in these areas. After a survey of residents, we have a red spots residents proposal, and we have some existing also. So now we have a full view what must be done just to encourage people to use bicycles. Objectives of the city to develop sustainable urban mobility, we would like, of course, the public transport to be fast, comfortable, and frequent. Now we are thinking a very ambitious plan. We are making, as I mentioned, feasibility study, and even there is a dream maybe to have a tram or rapid bus system. And of course, the operation system of tickets, routes, and schedules must be clear and understandable. Nowadays, we have some problems with minivans and state buses. Objectives, improving infrastructure for the cyclists. The lacking connections of cycling ways have to be built, and the coherent cycling network has to be developed. The ways must be safe, and parking places for the cyclists must be available at work or at home. And one of the ambitious our plans is to develop a bike storage system, because you know about 60 or 70% of our residents live in the southern part of the city. In block houses, and you can imagine what does it mean every day to take your bicycle to the 9th or 8th or even 2nd floor. So it's not convenient. We made actually some mistakes already. Nevertheless, we have here, actually, in Europe, we could learn from the good practices, but we've made, it was an attempt to accustom Klaipėda residents to leave their cars and to choose sustainable transport means. We made park and ride system. In the first picture, you can see it is empty. Probably nowadays, few cars are left through the whole day. But I think it was even the area selected for park and ride system wasn't very good, because it's nearby hospital area. It's in a borough of the city, but actually because public transport is not so good as residents would like to have, of course, they do not leave the cars and do not use the public transport. During these few years, we have a very huge urban sprawl. You can see here, this is a map of our city. It's actually very long and very narrow, but majority of the residents are migrating to the district of the Klaipėda region. And we are losing a lot of population. Maybe from those 25 years, we lost about 50,000 citizens in Klaipėda. And of course, maybe a lot of countries are facing the problem of high intensity of immigration to the countries with higher living standards. On the other hand, we have low birth rate and relatively high mortality. And what I mentioned, internal migration to other cities and suburban areas. Probably in Lithuania only capital city Vilnius has no reduced population. It is increasing every year. And also we think that there was a mistake, then very monofunctional territories were foreseen in the master plan of the city. And even the spread of workplaces affects daily traffic jams. And inefficient conduction of streets, traffic jams are formed. What we have, of course, we have much more problems. There is a lack of attractiveness in southern part of the city, lack of social infrastructure in northern part of the city, undeveloped communication with Klaipėda free economic zone territory. There is not public connection to this territory. And port area, because port is increasing and is increasing at the same time noise and pollution, and residents living close to the port now are quite demanding. And we have also aggravated exit from the port. Here you have, I would like to show you, we used to say that we have three faces of the Klaipėda: old city, Soviet city, and new suburbs. And percentage of elderly population is growing very much, and it's not so good. We have made also a plan. We have a target area in the central part of Klaipėda. And in this area, we want, you can look how it looks nowadays. It's actually nothing good, but it's from Soviet time, and nothing happened till now. But every year we are taking a few public areas and making renovation. And we made huge plans for this target area. We would like to bring a new quality for the target area and rehabilitation of housing, reconstruction yard and public spaces. Also, we want to regenerate Atgimimo and Vaidilo squares, parks and embankments of Danė River to attractive public spaces. We have very ambitious plan building new bridge over the River Danė and renovate old block houses. In this target area, we have about 25,000 people who lives in these old houses, and they are energetically inefficient. I will try. And also municipality buildings are renovating. We have a plan to reconstruct municipal football school to multifunction youth and sports center. We are building swimming pool which meets FINA standards. It must be finished in the end of this year. Of course, we have an ambition to attract young people, and we plan to become European Capital of Youth in 2020, and to attract more people to Klaipėda, renovation of inefficient public buildings, and focusing on culture. It was announced Lithuanian capital culture, and the port was a host of tall ships races this year. And a few years ago, we creative business incubator culture factory was opened instead of tobacco factory. Just a minute, I will finish it. And restoring the Klaipėda Castle Hill and adapt to needs culture and tourism. And also the old market area, which is also in very bad condition, we have plans to restore it. And the last one, vision of Klaipėda till in 2030 is a sustainable and prosperous maritime city and faster developing cultural and economical center in Lithuania with healthy, intelligent and responsible community, and the city where residents and visitors choose bicycles, public transport for daily journeys, or just go on foot. Thank you, and welcome to Klaipėda.
Thank you so much. It was very interesting, and it was good that we went deeper into one city. And you mentioned the three facets of Klaipėda: the old, and the Sovietic, and the new. Okay, never mind. But that was very interesting. In any case, and it is something that many cities in our region have in common, and it's just one example of the challenges that are shared. And then you enlighten us on the relations between the master plan or town planning in general and the social factors and the actual loss of population that you are experiencing. And that is also something where it would be interesting to discuss further in depth that what are the dynamics and why things are happening. And how is it, if it is, and how is it possible to have an impact on these phenomena through town planning?
You know, I think it's very nice to do something, but if there is no residents, why to do then? So it's we must think about very serious and to take some actions. I think that the main thing, we must attract young people to Klaipėda.
And what's better for that than becoming the capital for you?
That's for sure.
And I hope that you also have attracted many from the audience to come to Klaipėda, as we decided yesterday at the Sustainable Cities Commission meeting that next year there will be a Commission meeting in Klaipėda, most likely in September, around that time. So very warmly welcome to Klaipėda, and now we will break for coffee, and we will be back in this room quarter past back here to start. More interesting things coming. Thank you.